This shouldn't be true, but it is. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union built a machine designed to launch nuclear weapons after the people responsible for launching them were already dead. Not captured, not disconnected, dead. The machine's entire purpose was answering one question. What if America destroys us so completely that nobody is left to push the button? And somehow the answer wasn't, well, I guess that's game over. The answer was, let's automate revenge. A machine designed to make sure that even if the Soviet Union ceased to exist, nobody else got to enjoy the victory, which is less military strategy and more, if I'm going down, I'm taking y'all with me. The system was called perimeter. Everybody else calls it dead hand. Because the whole idea was a dead country reaching up from the grave and pressing the launch button. This is the story of the closest thing humanity has ever built to a real-life doomsday machine. Welcome to Unusual Perusal, where we explore the stories that make you laugh, scratch your head, and ask, wait, for real? Today, we're diving into perimeter. The Soviet doomsday system built to make sure that even if the country's leadership was wiped out, the missiles could still fly. It's a story about nuclear fear, automated retaliation, and the very strange comfort humans find in building machines that should never be used. Let's get into it. All right, to understand why perimeter existed, you gotta understand how tense the Cold War was by the early 80s. Not tense like two neighbors arguing over a fence, tense like two neighbors aiming flamethrowers at each other while insisting this is how world peace works. When we learn about the Cold War in school, it sounds almost organized. Two superpowers, an arms race, mutually assured destruction. But the reality was much messier. It was decades of both sides preparing for the worst possible thing, while telling themselves that preparation would prevent it. The strange logic was, if we have enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other completely, nobody will ever use them. Imagine looking at the most dangerous invention in human history and saying, you know what will make this safer? More of it. That was a strategy, and somehow, it worked. Mostly. But for the Soviets, there was one nightmare they couldn't stop thinking about. A decapitation strike. That's the polite military phrase. The less polite version is, what if America cuts off the head of the entire Soviet government before anybody can respond? The fear was that the United States could launch a surprise nuclear attack directly at Soviet leadership. Not the whole army, not every city, the people in charge. The ones with the authority to fire back. Because if you destroy the people who can order retaliation, the Soviet Union could still have thousands of nuclear weapons sitting in silos, but no one left with the power to use them. That's not losing a war, that's getting deleted before you can answer the email. And by the early 80s, this fear did not feel abstract. Missiles were getting faster, warning times were getting shorter, and both sides were watching each other like they were waiting for somebody to blink wrong. Then came 1983, a year that feels like history looked around and said, what if we made everybody just a little bit more nervous? There were military exercises, false alarms, political tension, and a general sense that one bad interpretation could turn the planet into a cautionary tale. One of those moments was Able Archer, a NATO military exercise that was meant to simulate a nuclear conflict. It was a drill, a rehearsal, a serious game of pretend. The problem was that the Soviet officials worried it might not be pretend. So now you got one side practicing nuclear war, while the other side is wondering if the practice is actually the opening move. That's not a stable situation. That's two people holding loaded weapons while one of them says, relax, I'm just rehearsing. So Soviet planners kept circling the same terrifying question. If the leadership is destroyed before it can give the order, how do you guarantee retaliation? Most countries might build a deeper bunker. The Soviets built something much stranger. That idea became perimeter. And the unsettling thing about perimeter is that once you hear the logic, it almost makes sense, which is exactly how you know the Cold War had gone too far. The system was designed to look for signs that a nuclear attack had actually happened. Not one random alert, not one glitchy sensor, a pattern. Radiation, ground shocks, silence from command. 3 things you do not want happening at the same time. Because a single warning could be wrong. Computers make mistakes, sensors get confused. Technology is very confident right up until it ruins your afternoon. So Perimeter wasn't just asking, did something explode? It was asking, did something explode, and did everyone in charge suddenly stop answering? Now, the popular image of Dead Hand is a fully automatic robot that wakes up and launches the entire arsenal by itself. That's the movie version. The real version appears to have been more complicated, and honestly, that might be even creepier. Perimeter reportedly had to be activated during a crisis. It wasn't just sitting there every day with his finger hovering over the apocalypse. Leadership would switch it into a special mode if they believed an attack might be coming. Basically, clicking the safety off a gun the size of a country. And even then, the final step likely still involved human officers. Not a president giving a speech, not a general standing in a war room, a small group of people in a hardened bunker, trying to decide whether the silence above them meant everybody else was already gone. But the most bizarre part of the system was how it would send the launch order. Because after a nuclear attack, normal communication might be gone. Command centers destroyed, phone lines useless, radio networks disrupted. So how do you tell missile silos across an enormous country to fire? The Soviets built a missile whose job was not to explode. Its job was to talk. A command rocket, if launched, would fly across Soviet territory, broadcasting orders to the nuclear forces below. No nuclear warhead, no city-destroying payload, just instructions. One missile flying over the country telling every other missile, it's your turn. And this wasn't just a sketch on a napkin. The system was developed, tested, and actually entered service, which means at some point, human beings had a meeting where they confirmed, yes, the apocalypse messenger works. All right, so here's the unusual part. Perimeter was not just built to make nuclear war possible after Soviet leaders died. It was also built to stop Soviet leaders from panicking while they were alive. That sounds backwards, but that's where the story gets interesting. The most dangerous moment in a nuclear crisis is not necessarily the explosion, it's the warning. Because the warning is when people have to decide what they believe. Is this real? Is this a glitch? Do we wait? Do we launch before it's too late? And the timeline is brutal. You don't get a week, you don't get a committee, you don't get somebody from legal saying, let's circle back. You get minutes, sometimes less. That pressure creates a nightmare called launch on warning. If you think enemy missiles are coming, you may feel forced to launch yours immediately before they get destroyed, which means the entire world can end because somebody trusted the first alert. And history gives us a terrifying example. In 1983, Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov was on duty when the warning system reported incoming American missiles. The computer said attack, the alarm said attack, the screen said launch. Petrov looked at all of that and decided no. Not because he had perfect evidence, not because the system calmly explained itself, but because something felt off. And he was right. It was a false alarm. The system had mistaken sunlight reflecting off clouds for missile launches. Just sit with that. The Cold War produced nuclear submarines, underground bunkers, and continent-ending missiles. And for a brief moment, civilization nearly got taken out by weather. Perimeter was designed to reduce that pressure. Because if Soviet leaders knew retaliation was guaranteed no matter what, they didn't have to rush. They could wait, verify, and breathe. That's the strange logic at the center of this whole thing. A machine built to launch nuclear weapons was also meant to make launching nuclear weapons less likely. Humanity looked at the apocalypse and said, what if we added a backup apocalypse to calm everybody down? And somehow the story gets even weirder, because for years the Soviets barely talked about Perimeter, which defeats the entire purpose of a doomsday machine. A doomsday machine only works as deterrence if the other side knows it exists. The exact point had already been made in the movie Dr. Strangelove. In the film, the Soviets built a doomsday device, but keep it a secret. And the whole joke is that this is incredibly stupid, because the threat only works if people know that they're being threatened. Then reality walked in 20 years later and said, actually, let's try that. The Soviets built something that sounded like satire and then didn't make a big public announcement. Imagine watching a movie mock the dumbest possible version of nuclear strategy and treating it like a product demo. To be fair though, secrecy may have had its own logic. If you reveal too much, the enemy can study the system, find weaknesses, plan around it. So the Soviets were caught between two bad options: tell people and expose it, or hide it and lose the deterrent. Which is a very Cold War kind of dilemma. The machine is too important to reveal and too important to keep secret. Perfect little circle of madness. Russian officials have suggested versions of the system remained operational. Other accounts say it was modernized. Nobody outside a very small circle knows exactly what exists today, which is not comforting, but it is honest. So yeah, the strangest thing about Perimeter isn't just that it was built, it's that it made sense to the people who built it. Because once you accept a world where nuclear war is possible, a machine that launches missiles after you're dead starts sounding reasonable. And that might be the most Cold War thing ever. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more history that sounds completely made up, but somehow isn't. And until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and always keep perusing the unusual. Thanks for watching.